Greg mentioned earlier, Tim K4RA will be presenting tonight on the basics of D-Star DMR and the C4FM system fusion systems. There have been a number of discussions on our net and previous meetings about just how complicated and confusing some of the digital radio capabilities are. And so Tim has graciously volunteered to give us an overview and help us evaluate which type of system that we may be interested in utilizing, and explain how they all of this fits together. So Tim, take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Can you see my screen? Just make sure.
Yes.
Good. All right, we got that. Well, good evening, everybody. Glad to be back. And so tonight we are going to talk about, like Lauren just said, different aspects, kind of an inch deep and a mile wide of different digital modes. This stuff is all going to be pretty much 2 meter 440, but we'll mention just a little bit at the end about HF. So the primary 5 digital mode systems are D-Star, DMR, or digital mobile radio, system fusion, or sometimes called C4FM, NXDN, and P25. The primary for tonight, we're going to talk about D-Star, DMR, and system fusion, just because NXDN and P25 are much less common in ham radio. They are ham radio, or can be ham radio modes. NXDN was created by ICOM and Kenwood for ham radio, but it doesn't really catch on and take off. So it is available. Those things do work, and we'll talk when we get to the end about the mega sites that allow you to do cross mode communication. They do support those modes. So if you have one of those radios, they still work and can be used. But for tonight, we're going to stay to the big 3 of D-Star, DMR, and C4FM. So let's see if we can talk about some of the digital basics here. First of all, I think most of you, if you have a technician license at least, you understand that analog radio takes your voice and modulates it on an RF carrier, and the radio on the other end just reverses that process. What happens in digital is you have a vocoder chip in the radio, and it converts your voice to a digital signal and sends the digital signal across the carrier, and then reverses that process on the other end. So different digital modes have different voice qualities, and some people would argue that there's nothing as good as analog FM. I can't say I disagree with that until you can't hear that person anymore because their signal has faded. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So one of the big benefits about digital is we're using less bandwidth than a standard analog signal. So the FCC is interested because our frequency spectrums are filling up, and if you can get more in the same amount of space, that's a good thing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So here's kind of if this graph makes a lot of sense, or makes a little bit of sense to everybody, analog signal degrades kind of on a linear path if you don't have obstructions. So on a linear path from the point of the, let's just say the repeater or the other station if you're doing simplex, until finally you just can't hear them anymore because there's more noise than voice. And that's kind of a linear decline, and so pretty soon you just can't hear them. With digital radio, the big difference there is that digital radio has error correction for the voice. So even though the radio on the receiving end may not get 100% of the signal, the error correction can fill in some of the gaps, and you can understand either everything that person said or most of it enough where you can pick out what that person is talking about, until you get up here. I don't know if you can see my mouse up here to that knee on the curve where the digital radio kind of falls off the cliff and we just lose you altogether. So it's generally pretty good until it's not good at all and we lose that person and can't hear them. So that's one of the benefits, is your range for the amount of power you're transmitting seems to be a bit better with digital than straight analog. So in comparing the digital modes, D-Star versus DMR versus system fusion, all of them have good things about them. All of them have drawbacks. And it's just a matter of which one is going to fit with what you're trying to do. D-Star is the first one that came out. It was created for ham radio, not by ICOM, but by the Japan Amateur Radio League. And then it is not a proprietary system. Some people think it is, but it is an open system. And ICOM is the one that picked up the manufacturing for that mode. What is proprietary is the vocoder chip that digitizes your voice and then undigitizes it, if you will, so that you can hear what that person is saying on the other end. So D-Star had quite a bit of a head start. And although I think DMR is actually an older system, DMR was originally created as a commercial radio platform, and then kind of molded or shoehorned into a ham radio application. So D-Star got a head start. They had a lot more users. They had a lot more towers, a lot more reflectors and repeaters, and just a lot more users because they got such a head start. System Fusion was created by Yaesu as a counter or as competition for D-Star. And then DMR, kind of the dark horse, came up kind of from behind. It didn't really have that many ham radio users. Things were a little more difficult to set up, and then through a number of things that came about, ham operators that actually wrote some software to make it easier to program the radios and the lower cost of DMR radios, DMR kind of took off. So you can see the best numbers that I could come up with as far as users, the top line on the graph here, about 74,000, probably more because not everybody has to register to use D-Star. About 172,000 current user IDs for DMR, which you have to have a user ID to participate with DMR. And about 10,000, the best I could find. I couldn't really get good numbers on System Fusion. So number of repeaters, you can see what's kind of happened there. Bandwidth, channel spacing, all that kind of stuff. Digital data. D-Star and System Fusion actually have a way to send pictures and that sort of thing. DMR, not so much. They can send text messages on DMR. Radio programming, you kind of look at which is easier and how does that work. And some of the radios you can program by the front panel on the radio, and some of them you need software. The DMR ones you pretty much are allocated to using software to program your radios. DMR does have the most number of vendors of radios. So if you're looking for a radio, you have the greatest number of choices, and therefore you have the greatest price spread as well. They're the cheapest radios, but you can also buy Motorola radios, which are on the spendy side. D-Star radios, you are left with either ICOM or Kenwood, are the only two manufacturers of D-Star. System Fusion is limited to Yaesu. Now, unless you use a hotspot, in which case you can mix and match, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you notice here, there's a reference up here to IRC, IRCDDB. It's like, what is that? It's kind of a goofy acronym. So I thought I'd throw a slide in here about what IRCDDB is. And it's an amateur radio network exchanging routing information. So in D-Star, one of the features that they built into D-Star is call sign routing. So if I wanted to call, I'm just going to pick Greg because he's not here, so I'll pick on Greg. If I wanted to call Greg and I know he has a D-Star radio and I know he was talking on a repeater recently, I could put his call sign in my radio and the network will remember the last tower that he was connected to. So I can call him directly and it will try the tower that he was last seen on first. It's a lot like how your cell phone works. As you travel, your cell phone is pinging the cell towers, and so the system knows where you are, so when someone calls you, it knows where to ring your phone. And this is the same thing. It works the same way, and D-Star has that ability. So if you have somebody you're looking for, you can call them directly, and you don't have to hop around in a bunch of different repeaters. So it will find them for you. It's kind of neat. This is kind of techie, and I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it's just the 3 different formats, and you can see how the digital data actually is transmitted, how it's different in the different formats. D-Star is a single channel and Fusion is a single channel, but DMR is actually two channels. They're called time slices or time slots. And so you'll notice in that center one, the DMR, you'll see yellow and then green and then yellow and then green and yellow and green and yellow and green because those are the alternating time slots. And so you actually have two different channels, if you will, in there that we can be using and doing two different things at the same time. So a little bit of the technical comparison. D-Star uses a vocoder chip called AMBE Plus, and some people say they don't like the way the voice sounds. It sounds a little maybe tinny or a little bit not natural because it uses that vocoder chip. DMR uses AMBE plus 2 or times second generation, I guess, and so does Fusion. And so their voice quality is a little bit better, in my opinion, than D-Star. D-Star is certainly readable, but I think DMR and Fusion have a little bit better voice quality. You can see on the modulation line here where the platforms use different kinds of modulation, how it gets that digital data to the other end. So I don't know if that's really important, but it's just a little bit different. And that is the primary reason why the systems are not cross-compatible. You can't take a Fusion radio and talk to a D-Star radio without some sort of translator in between. Same with DMR. The three systems are separate and they're not cross-compatible without a little bit of help. And we'll talk about that here toward the end. The multiplex method is frequency division multi-access for D-Star, and it's time division multi-access for DMR. So they're, again, a little bit different, but reasons they're not compatible. JARL, the Japanese Amateur Radio League, created D-Star. ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standard Institute, created DMR, and Yaesu created System Fusion. So here's just kind of a graphic that just shows you that D-Star is a 6.25 kilohertz bandwidth. DMR is 12.5, which, you know, doesn't sound very efficient, but you have to remember you have two channels in there. So there's twice as much data and information being able to simultaneously be transmitted in that bandwidth. And System Fusion is 12.5 across the board for a single channel, but that's why some people think System Fusion has a better voice quality. System registration. So D-Star, yes, you have to register if you're going to use a gateway. And what a gateway does is if you connect to one of our local D-Star repeaters and you want to go through the gateway to another repeater in another city or another country, whatever, then you have to be registered in the D-Star system. It's easy, it's free. It might take a couple days for the system administrator to get back and get you in the system. But it's easy. DMR, you absolutely have to register because your DMR ID is what tracks you throughout the system, and that's how the system knows where you want to go and what you're doing and who you are when you get there. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a little bit here. I'll show you the screen where that stuff shows up. System Fusion, no, you don't have to register to use System Fusion unless you want to have a Wires X node. And what that means is like a reflector or a chat room that you want to manage yourself and have that as like a local repeater at your house. Then you have to register to have that on the network. D-Star and Fusion use your call sign as your identifier, where DMR has a subscriber ID that you get when you sign up. They just assign you a number. It's about a 7 or 8 digit number that just tells the system who you are. And then on the display of the radio, D-Star and Fusion actually display your call sign because you enter that into your radio as you're setting your radio up so it knows who you are. And that displays on the other person's radio on the other end. So you can just see who's talking by looking at the display on your radio. In DMR, there's a subscriber ID, which doesn't really help you unless you've got that resolution on where it'll show you their name and so forth. And that's a little bit different, but it's not there 100% of the time. Is that call sign recognition acceptable for FCC ID? You know, our 10-minute that we have to be identifying ourselves. D-Star is yes, because that call sign goes across the display, and Fusion is yes, but it is still a good idea to self-identify so that everybody knows who they're talking to in the event they can't look at their radio. Connectability for the repeaters. Everybody, you can talk locally. If you can get on a repeater, you can talk to everybody at that location or whoever's on that repeater. Now, the one really neat advantage of D-Star is that you can link, as a user of the system, you can link that repeater to another repeater anywhere in the world, as long as the system administrator hasn't locked that down. Sometimes the system administrators don't want you changing the repeater because it's used for a special purpose, and they want to keep it local. So they will disable that feature, but generally you can, just on your radio, you can say, hey, I want to talk to somebody in Brazil or somebody in London or somebody in Spain or Greece or whatever. And if there's a repeater there, you can connect to it across the internet and you pop out on the other end. Now that means everybody on the repeater you're talking on is talking to everybody on the repeater at the other end. So it's really pretty neat. I've done that a few times. I've talked to people in London. I've talked to people in Australia. Right from your HT, if you can hit the tower, or your vehicle or your home shack or wherever. It's pretty neat. And again, all you need is a technician license to do this. You don't have to be a general or an extra. We can kick over some of these other things like echo tests and so forth. I can show you what that looks like in a little bit here. Memory selection basically is a menu on the radio. All of them kind of work that way. Difficulty programming. This is kind of a different one. The older D-Star radios were kind of a pain to program. The new ones are self-programmed, or they come loaded up, but you can also, I'm going to show you in a minute here, how you can refresh that repeater list and load it into your radio without typing a whole bunch of repeater signs and frequencies and so forth into your radio. DMR can be difficult. Once you understand, like anything, once you understand how it works, it's not too bad. And everybody seems to think that Fusion is the easiest to program. So learning curve, again, it's very subjective as to which one is the easiest and which one might be the best. Signal readability, FM is good. Some would say great if you're within range of that person or that repeater. D-Star is pretty good. I think DMR and Fusion are a bit better, and Fusion has a narrow and wide band, and of course, if you pick wide, it's going to be very good. On signal, for noise, FM is going to have some noise, but digital doesn't. There's virtually no background noise on digital radios. Robustness, recoverability, this is how easily the network or the format can recover if you lose your signal, and how long it takes to get back in and be talking again. D-Star can be a little bit slower. DMR and Fusion are pretty quick in that category. Maybe I should take a breather here and ask if there's any questions. I know I'm throwing a lot of information your direction. Anybody have any immediate questions, or you want to wait till the end? We can do that too. Not hearing anything. Okay. So what happens if you're not near a repeater? Like now, the Parker Radio Association put up another repeater on a mountain up here, not too far from us. It's real easy for us to hit. And well, it is for me because I'm on the Palmer Divide, so it's pretty easy for me to hit on Squaw Mountain. And that's a D-Star repeater. And that ties into the Palmer Radio Association's network of multi-platform stuff. So it's really neat. You can talk to people in all sorts of different formats. But I have one of these. This is called a Pi-Star hotspot. And that antenna is about 3 inches long, and the box is 3 inches long. So if I can show you this, I'm pointing it at you. Let's see if I can get it so the thing will, my background is right over it. So there's a display that kind of shows you what's going on, and then there's some colored LEDs over here that tells you what's happening. But it's a small little box. It's only about 3 inches, about an inch and something wide, about an inch high, and about 3 inches long. It's a small little box, plugs in with a USB cable for power, and you can talk to it with your HT. right? So my HT goes to the Pi Star, and I can, in this case, this is a screenshot of my display. So I've got DMR mode turned on, but I could also do D Star. I could do System Fusion. I could do P25. I can do NXDN. All these things you can. The box will do any of those. So if you have any of these radios, you can pretty much talk to everybody else. So it's not, this box is not a converter, although some of the newer ones actually do translation within the unit from D Star to Fusion and to DMR and so forth. So it's a great little tool. These things are not that expensive. They're about $120 or so for this hotspot, about $100 for the radio, and you can get on pretty quickly. So I bought it for DMR because I already had a D-Star hotspot, which works pretty well. And this way I can do them both at the same time and jump back and forth if I want to do that here in the shack. So the display on this thing just gives you a quick readout. It tells you who's talking on the talk group you're on. And this top one, 4000, is me disconnecting from the talk group. That's if you send a 4000 command, it just tells the system to disconnect. So it's pretty interesting. I'll show you that live in a minute here. So let's talk about D-Star registration real quickly here. Why register? Because it allows you access to the gateways, right? This is the big thing here, is that you can get across the gateways and get to other repeaters other than the one you're talking on if you're connected by RF, right? So just if you're going to do this, only register once. Don't get impatient and say, well, they didn't answer me within 5 minutes. I'm going to go to another tower and I'm going to register there too. All that does is confuse everything. So register once, or if you're going to go into HRO, those guys are usually administrators. Somebody there in the store is a D-Star admin, and they can just log you in and they can get you signed up immediately while you're there. One of the benefits of going into HRO. So a 3-step process. So you're going to go to one of the repeaters that has a D-Star repeater, and they'll have a page, look something like this. You put in your call sign, you create a password, or if you're a new user, log in if you're a current user or register, and it'll walk you through the registration page. Looks like this. It's pretty simple. This one was a Georgia repeater that I used to be affiliated with. So, but pretty simple. You put in some information, name, call sign, email, and a password. I mean, nothing real personal there. And it's going to take you to the gateway system, and you put in your information, and it poof, and a couple days, and they get you done. You put your call sign into the radio, so when you key up, the system knows who you are, and then that shows up on everybody else's radio display as you're talking. So once you get your registration done, then you can talk across the gateways. In the meantime, you can talk locally on your local repeaters. So if you have that. The DVAP is what I have, is a digital voice access point. So it's just a small little hotspot, just like the one I showed you, but works with D-Star. Pretty neat. And you get on and talk. So it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. Programming the radio is a little bit of a trick, but once you learn the syntax of how to put the call signs into the radio, it's not a big deal. And you can use any of the programming softwares for your radios to do that. So for D-Star, updating the radio memories, if you go to dstarinfo.com, they've got all the repeaters that the repeater owners and administrators have listed here, and you can do a download by region or by kind of whatever you want. If you're going to take a trip and say, I'm going to drive Route 66, you can pick all the repeaters along that way, do a download, and just install it directly into your radio. You don't have to type anything. It'll do it for you. It's pretty neat. Takes about a minute or two, and you're done. So you can have multiple sets of this and change programming as you go. So that's pretty handy, which the other systems don't have. The one other neat thing about D-Star is that it is HF capable. So if you have a Flex radio, the new Flex radios have capability. Some of the other manufacturers may have a module or a dongle you plug into the radio to get D-Star on HF, or you can buy a ICOM 7100 like this and do HF, and this is what I have. Just a little plug for the ICOM 7100. I know a couple of you have these. The thing that I like about this radio is that it has a built-in sound card. So for doing digital modes, it is really great. D-Star is built right into the radio, But if you want to do digital modes like FT8 or JSA call or RIDI or any of those other digital modes from your computer, this interfaces with your computer really easily. So just a slight plug there. So do an HF. There are D-Star nets on HF. So I hear those guys once in a while when I'm on HF and chatting away. And you can also get help. dstarinfo.com gives you some information. And there's a bunch of volunteers that run this, so they may not answer you right away, but a good place for information on D-Star. The DMR registration, you go to, they've changed where you go now. So now you go to radioid.net and to come up with a screen that looks like this, and you're going to agree to the terms. And so you have some I will and some I will not issues down here on the bottom. And once you agree to that and then register, it's going to ask you for the same information like the D-Star site did, your name, your call sign, your email address, and so forth. And then you can also get an NXDN registration if you want that here as well. So pretty straightforward. C4FM, if you want to register or if you feel like you need to for a Wires X node, again, same thing, Wires X website, which is the Yaesu website. It takes you here, you put in an email address, and then it lets you register. That's probably not real necessary, especially starting out, right? So the question becomes, if I have a D-Star radio, how do I talk to somebody on System Fusion? Or how do I talk to somebody on DMR or NXDN? And the answer is to use a mega site. And so we have two of those in our area here. We have the Parker Radio Association, has a very complex, technically very savvy website, a repeater site, I should say. You can learn more about that at parkerradio.org. And they've got nets, they've got digital nets, they have analog nets, they have all kinds of stuff. But if you have any of the digital mode radios, any of the 5 I mentioned, I think that's all they support is those 5, DMR, D-Star, NXDN, System Fusion, and P25, you can go there, talk into the system on that format you have, and everybody else hears you because they convert that format to everybody else and send it out. Same with High Country Digital Radio. This is the one that Robert was talking about earlier. ColoradoDigital.net. If you go there, you can learn about their network and their nets. They have that one on Tuesday night at 7:30, which is pretty neat. You don't even have to talk if you don't want to. If you just go onto your computer and check in, and they will go through the list, and you don't even have to say anything. But you can listen to them on D-Star and on DMR and on System Fusion and on NXDN and P25. So they've got all that same stuff too. So it's pretty neat. I listened to them last Tuesday night on DMR, and I had my D-Star radio right next to it, and the D-Star was current, and the DMR was about maybe 1 or 2 seconds behind. So it was pretty neat. So that's a good way to do cross compatibility between other modes. So just because you bought one, if you buy one brand of radio or one format, doesn't mean you're stuck with that. You can talk to other people if you go through one of these mega sites. So what does that mean? Why do I care? What do I do? What does this mean to me? And the point here really is that a technician license can get you talking globally. D-Star has repeaters all over the world. DMR has repeaters all over the place. DMR is a little bit better about having Colorado groups, national groups, international groups, worldwide. So you can just flip over to that talk group and listen, and you can hear people from all over the place. Reflector is what D-Star calls their chat room. Talk groups is what DMR calls it, and rooms, or Wires X rooms, is what System Fusion calls their chat rooms. And so you have different groups by different rooms by location, and a lot of them are by hobby. You can find people talking about all kinds of different things if you look for that particular chat room. Digital platforms support a lot of experimentation. So you'll see a lot of the things like these hotspots started out as an experiment using an Arduino or a small little processor that you can buy for just a few bucks. And then they load software on it, and which is called a sketch usually. And then you can make it do things. In this case, we got a radio transmitter out of it, and it's pretty small, low cost, and just fun to play with. And the FCC is interested in digital modes because of the lesser bandwidth requirements. So what do I do next? If you want to get involved in digital radio and you don't already have a radio, my recommendation is find an Elmer first. Find somebody, and we have a good handful of people in this club alone that will help you. The Parker Radio Association has a bunch of folks, and they are willing to help. The Colorado Net, the other super mega site, they have people that will help as well. They're a little farther away, but you find an Elmer and then discuss your needs. You have to have an FCC license, however, so you do need at least a technician license to get on the air, because all those registration places, every one of them asks you for your call sign. So you have to have a call sign. But once you decide which is the best mode for you, then you can go get a radio. As I said before, DMR is the most cost effective. You're about $100 for the lower end Chinese radios, but they work fine. You can run the price up to $400 or $500, $600 for a Motorola, but you don't need to do that. I know people that insist on having Motorola everything, so they bought a $600 radio, but you don't need to do that. So if you buy a $100 radio, something like this, and you buy a $120 hotspot like this, you're into DMR for about 100 or 220, 230 bucks, and off you go. So once you get that, then get your Elmer to help you program the radio. Please, it can be very frustrating getting the hotspot set up, because the instructions that come with the hotspot are terrible, absolutely terrible. Yes, they're in English, but they're terrible. And if you don't know what all the nomenclature is and all the acronyms and all the different things, you'll never figure it out. And I didn't figure it out, and I've been working on this for a while. I actually had to have Rex and Robert help me get set up and get all the settings correct on the hotspot, and then get a code plug, which is what goes in the radio to give you all your frequencies and channels and talk groups and all that stuff. So have your Elmer help you program everything, and then once you see how to do it, then you can add more things to your radio and go to more other places. It's pretty easy once you understand how it's laid out and what the format is. So then you're on the air, you're talking with whoever you want, whenever you want, and kind of wherever you want in the world. It's really a good fun thing to do, and it's one of the lower cost things that I've seen in ham radio. All right, with that, I have rambled long enough. Do I have questions from anyone?
Tim, I'll start off with a question. You mentioned a repeater in Parker that I think it was a D-Star or System Fusion. You mentioned that programming it, you would direct that repeater to connect to a repeater someplace else. What happens if you don't disconnect or change that back? Are there timing mechanisms such that would turn off that link if you went away or forget? Or how does that work with connecting to a repeater in another location?
Okay, good question. That's a D-Star function where you're connecting one repeater to another. And yes, there is a timeout value, and that's set by the system administrator. So if no activity across the gateway, that might be 15 minutes, it might be 30 minutes, and then they'll disconnect that. Some of them have no timeout at all, though. They've set to 0 timeout, so that means it'll stay there till somebody comes in and puts it back. That's why if you're going to do that, if you're going to link repeaters together, you need to say, okay, is anybody else, are we done talking? Okay, we're going to disconnect now. And before you leave the conversation, disconnect. Now, if somebody else says, no, I'm going to stay for a while, I'll take care of it when I leave. Okay, great. At least somebody is performing that disconnect. Otherwise, your repeater is connected to London or Brazil or Australia, and that's not courteous to the people on the other end, right? Good question. Anybody else?
This is Rich.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hi, Tim. Just a plug for some of our local stuff. I'm the D-Star admin for the local machines, the one that Armstead sort of shepherds is KE0VUW. And then the one that we don't register on that one. The other two machines we do registrations on. The one on Cheyenne Mountain is KC0CVU, and we do registrations on that one. A lot of people in Colorado come to that machine for registrations just because it's here, and I usually can respond within 6 hours to get your registration up and running. And the other one is KD0QPG, which is on Methodist Peak outside of Salida. We do registrations on that because of historical reasons. These machines have been here for a long time. One thing I might note to answer Lauren's question was on CVU on Cheyenne Mountain. We programmed that to have the 1 gigahertz module and the VHF to link to Parker all the time. So if you happen to tune to CVUs, either of those modules, you'll be connected into the Parker activity. Now, the UHF is, I believe, set up so people can play with it. Now, don't hold me to this because it changes at times. These typically are notorious for falling out of link. So even though we may put timeouts on some of these things, and others we haven't, just the nature of the, how should I say, weak internet connections we have up in the mountains tend to let these things unlink. And we do have some tools that try to keep them linked. You know, it kind of looks and says, oh, it's unlinked, I'll relink it. So the rules that I've been using is when somebody wants to use it for something and link it somewhere else, have at it. That's fine with us. We're not real stingy about that. And the idea is we're just trying to generate activity, so we link them up to Parker because it's got a lot of activity. So that's enough for me. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks for that clarification. So I wanted to show you real quickly here. I'll take questions in a second, more questions. This is my Pi-Star digital dashboard. So as you're connected, and I'm connected to this talk group, 31088, which is the one of the mega sites up there in northwest Colorado. It gives you can see my call sign when I've transmitted. You can see other people that have checked in. So you can see their call sign right here on the screen. Is Rex, are you still with us? Are you able to help me with a quick demo here?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'll have to reprogram to get on 31088.
Well, tell me which one you're on. Tell me which one you're on or which one you can get on, and I'll jump on there quick.
Okay, I shifted over to 31084, and I've got the D-Star on that one also.
Okay. So, all right. So what Rex said, he's over on a talk group, a DMR talk group called 31084. So I've already got that programmed in my code plug. So I turn my channel selector to that, and I'm going to press my push to talk. There it is right there. Now you can see on the screen at the very top, my radio, my call sign is here. I'm over on 31084. You can see down here the local RF activity. That's from my radio, right? I had a 1.1 second duration, and BER is bit error rate. So I'm right next to it. So I've got a really good rate. And now there's somebody else on there. Well, that's Rex, right? WD0AJG is Rex. So I'm going to do a quick little call sign here. K4RA on 31084. And we'll see if you can hear. So then.
Yeah, it's working back this way, WD0AJG. You're showing a 0.4 K4 VER.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Rex. K0 or K4RA is clear. All right, so that was just a real quick with Rex on the radio there, so you can see my call sign, you can see his call sign as he checked in and responded to me, and it's that easy to use this Pi-Star, this little hotspot. So the radio is set to low power because I'm only going a short way. The hotspot is good for maybe 300 feet, so probably around your house you could walk around with your radio and talk on this thing at your house, or you can put it in your car and drive around and use your cell phone as a hotspot and get an internet connection. That's how it gets to these talk groups. Or I can log into the other repeaters and other things that are available by the internet. So I don't know if that makes sense. One other thing that I want to mention before I go back to questions is one of the reasons that DMR has taken off so well is called Brandmeister. And let's see, I guess I have it right here. So Brandmeister is an organization that has a whole bunch of repeaters, networking basically, that links a lot of these repeaters and these talk groups. So you can kind of see on the Brandmeister dashboard, I've logged in, I've got my I have a username, a DMR ID, so I can log in here and you can kind of see what's going on in different parts of the world. One thing that was real interesting that I thought was fun down here, they can tell you online per country. So once in a while, the other night I was on in the US, which is right here, was way up here. It is today, 7335 users in the US. Every other country is down here in the small numbers. But anyway, so we're up here, 7,000 users. But this hotspot that I have is called an MMDVM. That's the guy that's his call sign in the UK that came up with this thing. So if you look at this pie chart and look at the different hotspots, these are all different hotspot types. OpenSpot 3 is a really common one. It costs a bit more, but it does some conversions on board. DV Mega is another D-Star one. All these different hotspots, but look at the majority of the hotspots are MMDVMs. That's this Pi-Star that I have right here. So it's not only probably the cheapest, but it's the most widely used, and maybe that's why it's the most widely used, because it is the cheapest. But a capable little box, it's not real expensive, and can get you on the air pretty quickly. So that's Brandmeister. So you might hear about them. They do a lot, have done a lot for DMR. Other questions? Anybody have anything they're wondering?
This is Lauren again. I've only been using my Pi-Star here locally. I have not branched out, and so it's DMR only. I'm not aware of any repeaters that I can access here that are DMR capable. Are you aware of any? And if so, are you able to program or link to talk groups like you can here, like you set it up for 31084 from 31088? Are you able to do that in DMR enabled repeaters?
Good question. I haven't done that either. Rex or Robert?
Tim?
Yeah.
Tim, if you can access an actual Brandmeister repeater, I think the way it works, Tim, is that usually time slot 1 on the repeater is a static connection. That is, the repeater owner determines where that is going to go talk group wise. And on time slot 2, the repeater owner can give some options that you can dynamically link to certain talk groups, much like you did on that Pi-Star. But it is not anywhere near as many options. With the Pi-Star, you can go anywhere in the world. But if you're going directly to a Brandmeister tied repeater, it is the repeater owner that determines what talk groups are dynamically linkable, for lack of a better term.
Okay, that's right. So in D-Star, the user gets to select where you're connected. And in DMR, the administrator of the repeater gets to decide where you're connected. It's a little bit less flexible that way. And I apologize, I don't know that much about System Fusion. I had to do a bunch of reading about that. I don't have a Fusion radio, but Rex does. So he might be a better source of Fusion information.
Comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Jim didn't go quite far enough. The DMR, there are 2 DMR systems available in the Colorado Springs Monument area. One of them is Rocky Mountain Ham, which has no connection to the outside world. They have a repeater connect up on El Magre Mountain. Now, it will connect pretty much. You have 2 time slots on that. It'll connect to Denver and it'll connect southern Colorado, but you won't get much activity. Now, there is a DMR machine supposedly on Cheyenne Mountain that is Brandmeister, and I don't have the frequency of that one. I haven't gotten into that for 4 years. When it went down, I didn't get back into it, and I don't know. Rich might know a little more about that. I think it's kind of linked up with Cheyenne Mountain outfit, but maybe not. I really don't know exactly who can. Well, no, Rocky Mountain Ham has that now. Looked that up the other day. Yeah, Rocky Mountain Ham owns that Brandmeister machine up there on Cheyenne Mountain for Colorado Springs. Supposedly, it will link you to the 31084, 31008, anything Colorado-based, it'll link you up to. So that's a possibility, but you're going to have to do a little internet research on Rocky Mountain Ham and their DMR machine in Colorado Springs. Other than that, I'm a little lost.
I think that Rocky Mountain Ham machine is more oriented towards the fun group repeaters. That's all I've ever heard on that, Rex, and I think it's more of an experiment by the Rocky Mountain Ham people in delving into Brandmeister.
Well, yes, and I think the time slot 1 is locked in on the fun machine. But when I read on their system, time slot 2 is open to be linked up to whatever other talk group you want. But I don't think anybody ever links it up, so there's nobody ever talking on it.
Yeah, I've never heard anything like that on time slot 2, and I can't even get the, what do they call it in DMR, parrot, to come back to me on the time slot 2. I think it's really pretty much experimental, and you know, it's not what I would call a true Brandmeister machine at this point. And I think you have to have some coverage from the Denver area to get more of towards a true Brandmeister machine.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, but I think it has some serious receive problems as well, because you just can't get into it unless you're right there.
Well, you know, I'm 19 miles from and I can look at it, and it just doesn't want to work for me here in the Black Forest.
Okay, very good, guys.
Another question?
Yep, go ahead.
The Pi-Star is a software download. What hardware are you using with it? I understand it's Raspberry Pi, but what are you using as a hat or something?
That is when you buy a Pi-Star, the hardware comes. It's $120, and you get this box already loaded with software. All you got to do is plug it into power and hook it up, configure it to connect to your Wi-Fi network at your house or wherever you are, and then you got to program the options and the settings and so forth in here. I can show you what that looks like.
Hey, Stephen, this is Lauren. I think it's a Pi Zero in there.
I believe you're right.
That would be stunningly tiny.
Yep, they're small. So this is the page that Rex had to help me with. Right. So just pulling it out of the box, you're going to have to know what to set on some of these items, and but it's not hard. Once you go through it, you're done. You only have to do that one time. I
wasn't able to. I've been wandering around the site, the Pi-Star site. They have different hardware recommendations, but I didn't see a single purchase. Do you have a link for that?
Amazon. Just go to Amazon and type in Pi-Star and then poof, it'll come up.
Okay.
There's actually several people that sell them on there. There's a couple people that take that circuit board and put it in different boxes. So you will see prices from 120 to, I want to say 150, 160, but I couldn't see a reason to spend more than 120 because it's the same unit.
Okay. Comment here. For those that might get on the net tomorrow night, the Colorado Digital Group has, I think, 4 or 5 left, maybe a few more, but they have a few hot spots, some with screen, some without. They're mostly, well, I can't say that they're all. There's a couple of them that are Pi 3As. Most of it was Pi 0. And what it is you get a Pi of any kind, doesn't make a difference. 0A, 3B, 3B plus, and then you buy that. If you're building them, then you just buy the.
Oh, we lost your X.
On the little SD card that you plug in, and then you program that, and you're done.
Right.
I notice they have hats that are dual channel and single, and that's why I was looking for that.
Yeah.
So yes, Rex, it makes sense.
Right. So pretty straightforward once you got it. Now, Jim mentioned Parrot. So you program one of those, that talk group into your radio, and I'll show you how this works. So I've got that on my radio, and I'm going to say K4RA testing, K4RA TLM monthly meeting. And I let off, and now it says private call on my display.
And I'm going to say K4RA testing, K4RA TLM monthly meeting.
Okay, so that just parrots back what you just said. It just tells you you're connected to the system, and it's hearing you, and it's just replaying what you just said. So that's how you can find out if you're working or not. Nobody else heard that. It was just me going to the system, and then it repeated it back to myself. So that's what.
Comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of people have problems with that because when you set this up, that needs to be a private call versus a group call. And if
Correct.
it's set up in a group call, you'll never hear it. So it took me about 6 months to figure that one out.
Right. This is why you need an Elmer. You could kind of hear some of the discussion between the guys that know about this stuff, and you just need someone to help you get it set up that first time. And then once it's set up, then you're good to go. Then once you see how it works, you can add more talk groups or more repeaters to your code plug. And depending on where you want to go, maybe you have a cabin up in the mountains and you want to hit one of the sites up there, you can program all that in so it's in your radio when you go. So it's really pretty neat. So whether you pick D-Star or DMR or Fusion or any of the other ones, NXDN or P25, whatever, it's just fun to play around with a different mode, and you don't have to have a general or an extra license. It's great if you do, but if you don't, you can still play. Any other questions or comments or anything from anybody?
Lauren again here. I've had a number of conversations, on different talk groups, and through Brandmeister, I am able to talk to people with D-Star radios. Right. So there's some sort of cross-linking that's taking place between. I can't remember what the term was for D-Star, but with a DMR talk group. Right. So there's some cross-linking of technologies, but is that taking place within the Brandmeister servers?
Yes, because you have to have something that does that. So the Parker Radio Association has a whole bunch of equipment that they use to merge all the conversations together. And everybody does it a little bit differently. I've read some of the different administrators across the country have talked about the systems they've used and VPNs to connect this and that. And everybody seems to be doing it a little bit differently. I'm not sure there's a standard way of doing it, but it's do that merging of conversations. Otherwise, they're not compatible inherently, right? So anyway, are we out of time?
I do have a couple comments.
Okay, go ahead.
first of all, very well done, Tim. And this is a very complex subject, and there's a lot to it. So very well done. The other thing is on the top group 1088, what we were talking about earlier. If you go to that website, they have their nets recorded, and you can go back and listen to the net, and it's you can see how it's done and things of that nature. But it's very well, it's very professional. So that's the only other input I wanted to put. But very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Alrighty.
If I unmute, maybe I can talk. You mentioned NXDN as having some amateur usage. I wasn't necessarily aware of that because I thought it was pretty much commercial use. And is there any local use of NextN, or where is it? Where might we stumble across that?
Good question, and I think the best person to ask would be Armstead. He's the only one that I know that has an NXDN radio. I don't know, and my understanding was that it was created by ICOM and Kenwood for amateur radio, but maybe it didn't find an amateur radio interest group, so they kind of went commercial. I don't know. Maybe they did the reverse of DMR. I don't know.
I had the opportunity to check out a NextDen system for the broadcast station I was working for because our assignment desk wanted to go and hide and not broadcast where they were going. And the radios we were using were pretty much all Kenwood, and it was my understanding at that point that it was pretty much commercial and, sort of like the P25 maybe, that, very few hams venture off with NextN or P25.
Right. That was the impression I got too, and that's why I kind of left them out of the presentation. It would just muddy the water even more. So if someone's going to get into this, if they're really serious and you want to get into an NXDN or a P25 system, then that's great. But for most of us, D-Star or DMR or Fusion will fill the need, what we want to do to be able to get and talk to people.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, when you're talking P25, you're dealing with Motorola, and, that's not going to be cheap. And even unless you know somebody that has the CPS to program them, that's a $300 subscription just to get the software to be programming the P25.
Right.
Comment.
Yeah, there he is.
I just wanted to say there are several NXDN amateur repeaters in Arkansas, and they're linked together across the internet. And I've gotten on them and talked to people in New England and Florida and all around with a handy-talkie. So it works similar to these other systems. But I haven't found any NXDN repeaters in Colorado yet.
Okay.
And Armstead is pretty much ICOM or Kenwood, a product that you have to utilize the NextDen system, isn't it?
That's my understanding. The sound quality is excellent. Of course, I think it came along later after some of these other systems. But my unit is VHF, and so it would be better for the hotspots if it was UHF, I think. So I haven't been able to use it. I haven't even tried to use it here, but I guess I could set up a VHF hotspot and try it.
Yeah, I was just curious if you try to hook up to one of these mega sites, either Parker Radio or the High Country Digital, and if that would work. They claim it does. Their website says it works, so you're the only one I know that has an NXDN radio.
Well, maybe when I get some free time here, I'll try it.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else?
I found that I had to do A/B comparison between NextN and DMR. Now I had Kenwood product for NextN, and I had Motorola product for DMR. And, you know, this is 10 years ago now or more, but Motorola quality as far as the audio, you know, all the broadcast engineers thought that Motorola was better than NextN, but, you know, it may have changed since then.
Okay, Lauren, I think it's back to you.
Well, Tim, I would like to echo Barry's comment of thank you for taking a wildly complex and confusing thing to distill it into something that is still complex and confusing, but a little bit more understandable, hopefully, for everybody. So nice job on that today, and thanks very, very much. And it'll certainly help getting these posted so we can go back and refer. You know, I think the hard thing to do, or at least it was for me, is, you know, what do you want to go by? And I think, you know, my comment is from what I've heard is there's just a tremendous amount of flexibility with D-Start or DMR. I don't think you can really go wrong. If you want to get into digital radio, you can talk to people locally, you can talk to people all over the world with either one of those. So just my 2 cents worth is, you know, find something you like, find something you can afford, and go play. And you know, a thumbs up for the Pi-Star or these hotspots. It's not a huge investment, and you know, once you get past some of these really, I have no idea why it doesn't work, but it's one box you need to check or not check, and all of a sudden it works thanks to Rex in my case as well. You know, all of a sudden you start looking at it and it starts becoming a little bit clearer. So as complex as it might be and as confusing as any of this might have seemed, don't let it hold you back if you're interested, because people are here to help you figure it out, and it's a good bit of fun. So,
yep.
With that, if nobody else has any questions, I think we're a wrap for the night.
I do have one question for Rex, and that is the Rocky Mountain ham. They got a good system here in the States, but nobody uses it. You know, you can go probably from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Albuquerque, New Mexico on it, but you may hear a truck driver or two, and that's about it. Do you know the reason why?
Well, I'd have to agree with you, although a year or two ago there were two guys, one at Lake George and one a little further north, and they were always on the Southern Colorado, which is talk group 720. There again, their talk groups don't match up with Brandmeister. They don't match up with anybody else. It's their own stuff, and they used a talk group that matches with the prefix code for that area. But yes, there is activity, and occasionally you'll hear stuff on the El Magre from the guys in Albuquerque. The Southern Colorado, there's a Southern Colorado link that goes clear down into Albuquerque on the mountains, and I've heard a couple of 5 calls from Albuquerque working on the southern half, but it's like it's almost a dead repeater. You just don't hear much, but that's what it was set up for. It was set up as the emergency services Rocky Mountain ham, and they didn't want to connect to anything else, and that's what it's for.
To turn this back on. All right. It's a waste of repeaters. It's a good system. It works. It sounds great. And I wish more people would use it. Jim Hatfield and I used to talk on it before he passed. But other than that, not many people use it. Anyway, thank you for the education.
Night. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Good night. You're welcome.